What is going on, everybody? It is me again. It is HorrorFan34, and welcome to another video, and welcome to day 7 of the 31 Days of Horror Challenge in October. Now that we are on day 7, I figured I'd talk about this film next, because I can't believe I have not yet reviewed this film before on the channel, or just for Halloween season or anything. And this is another one I always thought was a very underrated remake, because this is a remake actually that we'll be talking about today. I always thought this remake was very underrated, and I don't really hear many people even talk about this film nowadays anymore. I feel like it got a decent about word of mouth when it first came out back in 2010, but I feel like it never gets brought up as much anymore. And when it comes to horror remakes, you don't really hear this one get brought up that much by the horror community out there. But I love this film very much better than the original. And of course, that review is going to be on the Crazies. Yeah, the Crazies remake from 2010. As you can see, this is from when I got it at FYE, and the stickers are still on it from 2010. But yeah, the Crazies, 2010. I think this came out around February of 2010, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, this is a remake of the George Romero film from, I think, 1973, which I'm going to be completely honest, I'm not really much of a fan of the original Crazies. I thought it was a little too dull, too slow, and not really one of my favorites of Romero. I prefer Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Monkey Shines, Creepshow when it comes to Romero. I do think this is one of those instances where the remake outshines the original. It's like up there for me with like things like The Fly and Last House on the Left and like Hills Have Eyes. I think this is like one of those few cases where the remake is, in my opinion, better than the original. And I think this is another one of these right here. Now, if you don't know, it takes place. I think it takes place in. I think it was Idaho, or I think it takes place in Idaho, I believe, or Illinois. I think it's Idaho though, and of course there is there's an unknown toxin that's infecting people and turning them into these crazy killers. And then basically you have the sheriff of the town, played by Timothy Olyphant, who's right there, and you have his wife, who's pregnant, played by Rhoda Mitchell from Silent Hill. And basically they're trying to escape from the town, and of course the government shuts they use like really deadly force to close down all the exits, and basically anybody that's infected can't leave the town. But unfortunately there's a few survivors there that can't leave because of the government shutting down all the exits and all that stuff, and basically they're trapped there, and they got to find a way to get out of here while these killers are terrorizing people. And that's the basic idea with the film. And I always keep forgetting this is directed by Brett Eisner, the guy that did Sahara with Matthew McConaughey. But I always thought this film was very underrated. Now, first off, the cast. Timothy Olyphant, I will be honest, I wasn't really the biggest Timothy Olyphant fan for a while. I just never really was much of a fan of his. But as the years have gone on, I've grown to like him more and more in the films I've seen now. I mean, I thought Timothy Olyphant was really good in Scream 2. Really enjoyed him in Live Free or Die Hard. Also really, he's been in a few other things too, Timothy Olyphant. Can't think off the top of my head what they are, but I think he's a decent actor. I like Timothy Olyphant, and I think this is without a doubt his best role as the sheriff. I really like him in this. You have Rhoda Mitchell as his wife, Rhoda Mitchell from the Silent Hill movie, and plenty of other movies as well. I thought she does really a good job as the wife. You have Joe Anderson as another guy who I think he's another sheriff that works for Timothy Olyphant. Joe Anderson I always remember from A Perfect Getaway, if anybody remembers that film from back in, I think, 2009. And you also have Danielle Panabaker, who was in the TV show The Flash as Caitlin Frost, would later be in the Flash TV show, and of course was in Friday the 13th, the remake, as Jenna. She's been in a lot of other stuff as well, but they're like the main two things I remember her the most from. And I think it has a really good direction by Brett Geisner and has definitely some very memorable moments. Like the two of them that stand out to me the most about this film is, I'll say the one, and I'll say my favorite one. So, one that stands out to me is when they're going through this car wash, these survivors, and one of the infected people gets on top of the car they're driving in, and they take like a rope and they wrap it around Danielle Panabaker's neck, and they yank her out of the car, and she gets hung in the car wash. I always remember that part where her neck kind of snaps back a little bit. Always remember that part. Always, that was kind of like an oh shit moment, because it was like one of those things where it was kind of like Danielle Panabaker who gets killed in the Friday the 13th remake. It was kind of like an unexpected death, kind of like in that one. It was like the same thing with this. It was like an oh shit type of moment. And of course, my favorite moment in the entire film is when Rhoda Mitchell is trapped on like these beds, on these gurneys that everybody's laying on, like all these survivors, and they're trapped there. And you have this guy, which is basically this scene here on the cover, this guy here, who's going around with a pitchfork and stabbing all these victims, and it's very graphic how they're doing it with the pitchfork. And Rhoda Mitchell is like over in the corner. She can see this guy get inching closer and closer to her, and luckily Timothy Olyphant and the others get there in time and get the guy and rescue Rhoda Mitchell from being stabbed by the pitchfork. But I always remember that part too. I mean, remember like that pitchfork just creeped me out. And it's got some really great moments of gore, like especially like I said, the pitchfork scene has good gore. And I also really like the idea. I like the whole the setting of the movie in this desolate town. And I always kind of wish we would have gotten a sequel to this, because it does leave on like kind of a sequel bait ending. But I mean, overall, if you like the Crazies, if you like horror remakes, and if you haven't seen the Crazies, I highly recommend that you check this out. And even if you weren't too much of a fan of the original Crazies like me, I highly recommend that you give this a look, because I think it is definitely far more superior than the original. But that's just my opinion. But I think the Crazies is a solid remake. So that's pretty much it for my review for the Crazies. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.